imagine, son.
All right, guys, welcome back to another Creator Chat. My name's Ryan, and today my guest is Trina Robbins, one of the first female underground cartoonists and a pioneer for women in comics. And it is an extreme pleasure and honor to have you here today, Trina.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi.
So first of all, I just finished your book, Last Girl Standing, so I feel like I kind of know you a little bit. But for those that may not be familiar, may not have read the book, I just wanted to, just talk to you today about, from your beginnings to what you're currently doing. So, like most guests that I have on the show, I always ask how you first got into comic books.
Well, my mother taught me to read when I was 4. And I really she was a second grade school teacher. And I just totally got into reading. I mean, reading everything. And my mother was very good. She didn't just give me books, but she gave me comics. They were the kind of comics that parents approve of, funny animal comics, things like that. I remember one of my favorites was Raggedy Ann and Auntie comics because I loved Raggedy Ann. And they had no, in those days, there was this problem where some parents had been convinced that if kids read comics, they were going to become little juvenile delinquents. But my mother knew better than that. I mean, she saw me reading everything, not just comics, but everything. So there was no problem. I had supportive parents.
And what led you to wanting to create your own comic books? What was that thing that sparked that in you that wanted to create?
Well, I also drew. I mean, I drew from the moment I could hold a crayon, in my little stubby fist. And it was an obvious, if you're reading something that is composed of words and pictures, then the obvious reaction is, oh, I can draw words and write I can draw pictures and write words too. So voila. And again, my supportive mother, who used to bring home from school reams of 8.5 by 11 Board of Education paper. If you held it up to the light, you could see a Board of Education watermark on it. And also lots of pencils, lots of nice number 2 pencils, which I would chew the erasers off of, but I would also use them to write and draw. And you just fold the paper in half, and you've got 4 pages, and you just start drawing, and you've got a comic.
In your book, you talk about the early days of underground comics. I learned a lot of things that I was not aware of prior to reading the book. I mean, I couldn't put the book down. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what it was like for you as a woman in a male-dominated industry, and especially with a lot of the blatant misogyny that was one of the things that I was not aware of. I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate a little bit on that for everybody watching and listening.
Well, the thing is, in the very beginning, I mean, we're talking about 1966, which was when my very first comic was published in 66. In the very beginning, there were so few people drawing comics that I was not thinking in terms of, gee, I'm the only woman. I was just thinking in terms of, gosh, there's 5 of us and we're all drawing these comics, and isn't that cool? And because even today, so many people, when you say comics, just think of superheroes. And they think, bam, pow, zap, right?
Yeah.
That's such a cliche. But in those days, to suddenly realize that there was something that you could do a comic, and it didn't have to be superheroes. It didn't have to be guys punching each other out. It could be something that you related to as a college student or as a hippie or as a young person, because it was revolutionary, and it was revolutionary times. So anyway, like I say, it started out great. It started out, wow, we're all in this together, and there's only 5 or 6 of us. But as the movement grew, and it grew, of course, very quickly, by the late 60s, because in underground comics, you could write and draw whatever you wanted. There was no censorship. There was also no self-censorship. And it turned out that a lot of these guys had extremely misogynistic feelings towards women. And I'm not talking about just simply, oh, chicks, and let's score with some chicks or something like that. Or wow, look at her in that tiny little miniskirt, isn't she hot? No, I'm talking way beyond that. I'm talking, rape depicted as something funny, humiliation, even murder, killing a woman, beheading a woman, depicted as something funny. And that was when I started noticing, hey, this isn't funny. And the guys would say, oh, it's only satire, you have no sense of humor. I have, of course, since then, it's taken me a while to understand that people will say really hateful things. And that's not just misogyny, I'm talking about homophobia, I'm talking about really nasty remarks about gay people. I'm talking about racism, horrible remarks about people of color, and then say, I was just kidding, but they're not.
Yeah, I mean, like there was some. I'm not gonna. I don't need to pull out names, but there was some names of creators that are revered, and then to read that, I was just like, I was really blown away. And as I was reading the book, like I started reading that, I'm like, that's when I couldn't put it down. Like, and like going from there with the misogyny that you were witnessing, you went on to do women's comics, girl fight comics as well. Was elevating women in the field always at the forefront in terms of stuff that you wanted to accomplish as a cartoonist?
Really, I wasn't thinking in terms of elevating women. I was thinking in terms of, I want to express myself and I want to express my feelings. And it just so happens I'm a woman. So the work that I produce is going to be feminist, whether I set out on purpose to be feminist or whether I just speak my mind on paper.
One of the most famous female characters in comic books is Wonder Woman, right? I think even early days that the people have gone back and like pointed at stuff of where it was kind of deemed. I mean, there was like, they were talking about like the bondage and stuff like that, which I guess you could kind of consider somewhat misogynistic as well. But you actually had a chance to work on the character.
About that bondage. Guys are so hung up on bondage. It's really funny. I was reading Wonder Woman, and we're talking about now the late 40s and early 50s when I'm reading Wonder Woman. I didn't see any bondage, and little kids who read Wonder Woman did not see any bondage. What we saw was this fabulous, beautiful, strong woman who lived on an island in which no men were allowed. It was a complete woman's world. And she fought the bad guys, she fought the Nazis, and after that, she just fought the men. And she was always battling men who thought a woman couldn't do it. That's what we saw.
Yeah, I just was saying that because of stuff that I've read.
Oh, guys love to write about that. They really do. It really thrills them to write about bondage in Wonder Woman.
You actually had a chance to work on the character, and I was wondering what that experience was like for you.
Well, for me, it was an homage to Harry G. Peter, who was the artist who created Wonder Woman. You have to remember with Wonder Woman, and there are a lot of other cases like that. Alice in Wonderland is a good case, where the artist is just as important as the writer, because the artist envisions the character so much that you always see the character, no matter who draws it. It's still some variation on what the artist created. I use Alice as an example because when you think of Alice in Wonderland, it's always the girl with the long blonde hair and the blue dress and the little white pinafore, always. And that was created by Tenniel, who drew the first Alice. And it's the same with Wonder Woman. No matter what variations on the costume, it's always the eagle. DC tried to make it a W, but it's kind of gone back to the eagle because an eagle is so much more interesting than a W, and it's always this starry skirt. So Harry G. Peter is very important and under-recognized character. So I wanted to do it in the style of Harry G. Peter as my homage to him.
You know, like since then, I know you've worked on other projects, but I think over the past 20 plus years, you know, for my research, you've written mainly prose, right?
Yes,
About women in the industry and stuff like
yes.
that. And I was wondering what led to that decision to shift from writing and illustrating to mainly focusing on prose writing and writing more of, I don't want to say just historical stuff, but kind of like it's history and comic books is pretty much what you are doing. I was wondering because I find that interesting. I love the history of comic books. So
Me too.
I said when I've read your book and I knew I looked for something that I could read about of your work because I couldn't get a hold of your recent book. It was back ordered at Diamond, and so I found this book and I was like, oh, this is even better. I love reading historical stuff, and I was wondering what led to you deciding to shift focus into that.
Well, you know, guys used to say one of two things, or else they would say both of these things. One is girls don't read comics, and the other was women have never drawn comics. And I knew those were both untrue. As someone who as a girl read comics, and it wasn't just me, it's not like I was this geeky girl, the only one who read comics. All my girlfriends read comics. All the girls I knew read comics. So I knew that was bullshit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
also figured, okay, if us girls read comics, then I bet they're also wrong when they say women didn't draw comics. So there was this great big research hole, completely blank, left for me to fill. Because I also discovered that when guys wrote histories of comics, they didn't write about the women. They wrote about Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Spider-Man and Batman, you know, but they were not the least bit interested in writing about women.
And that's what like I was saying, like I like learning more about other stuff because like I have to do my own research. If I go pick up a book that's history of comic books, I'm not getting the full history. I'm not getting the full scope of everything. And that's why I really try to expand the way I do my research when I'm looking at creators or researching maybe some people that I want to talk to that maybe not as many people are aware of. I love that you've kind of helped add to that history and are making it easier. You know, as a dad of a little girl, you know, I like being able to show her stuff that is geared more towards women. Like I think there was a book that I just finished, Femme Magnifique, that Shelley Bond edited. That's 50 most magnificent women in history. And I just like there's projects like that, or the Insider Art project that just was done to help female and non-binary creators during the pandemic. You know,
Yes, yes, I contributed to that one. I'm very proud of contributing to that.
Yeah, I think it's awesome, and I've been talking to Shelley and like I was asking her, I was like, when are you going to do a print? When are you going to do a print copy? Because I like books in my hand. I don't really like reading digitally, and I'm super stoked that it was backed on Kickstarter. I can't wait to actually get to see that book in print. And then it leads me to your new project, Flapper Queens.
Yes.
I have always been, and I can't explain what it is. I've always been fascinated with the 20s fashion style, the way that they used to illustrate women. I don't know what it is. I can't really.
Me too. Maybe you were fascinated by it because it really is beautiful art. I mean, that was a period, the Art Deco period, of just incredible illustration, incredible art by men and women.
Yeah, and so when I saw that book, I think that's when I reached out to you because I knew the name. I knew your name. I heard of you before, but that book came out. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to reach out. I want to have a chat with her. So I was wondering if you could kind of give us all a little bit of the backstory on how that project came about and what intrigues you most about that era.
Okay, hold on. I just happen to have the book available.
Oh, nice.
So is it already on back order? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I couldn't get a copy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's worth it. I mean, it's gorgeous. You know, I mean, I can compliment my own book because the real gorgeousness of it is not really it's not really up to me. It's because the women in the book were so fabulously talented. So I can't take credit for that. I can only take credit for writing about them and putting it all together.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
So what was the question?
Oh, so
Sorry.
It's okay. So I was just asking you if you could tell us a little bit about why you chose to do this book and what personally has fascinated you about that era of the art.
As I said before, it was an amazing period for illustrators. I mean, just such talent, and the whole Art Deco style is so beautiful. Excuse me. So a lot of the women in the book I had already written about in my book, Pretty in Ink, which is simply about all the women who drew comics, American women who drew comics during the entire 20th century, and in fact, starting in 1896. But because it was a book about all these women, the specific women in Flapper Queens, who are so incredible, I couldn't give them the space they deserved. You know, I couldn't give them more than a page, or in some cases, just a few paragraphs, when you're talking about hundreds of people, right? So I wanted them to have a book of their own because they were so good. People needed to see more of them. People needed to know about them. And then what always happens, it's great, you write one book and people get in touch with you. You write one book about women cartoonists and people get in touch with you. Women, I drew comics. I drew for Disney in 1956. I drew for Marvel in 1949, stuff like that. Now, some of these women are no longer with us, but I'm sure glad that I got to meet them and interview them while they were still with us. And now, because of course the 20s and 30s is so long ago, I hear from people who say, oh, my great aunt drew comics. My great grandmother even, my grandmother drew comics. And you see the stuff and it's incredible, it's fantastic. So people themselves have helped me with the research. So, okay, I amassed all these women and got to write about them specifically, got to put a spotlight on these fabulous women who people either didn't know or very few people knew about.
And can you talk a little bit? I know you focused on, I believe it said, did it say 5 to 6 are artists that you focused on in the book, or is it multiple?
Oh, there are multiple artists, but the ones that I focus on most are the ones who did the color art. You know, these are women who drew comics for the newspapers. There were no comic books yet. And they were all really good, but it was the cream of the crop who got to draw the full color, gorgeous full color Sunday pages. You had to be really, really good to get a whole full color Sunday page. So there were really basically 3 women, and that's the other women, the black and white ones are also fabulous, but these are the ones that make up the gorgeous full color illustrations. See, this is Ethel Hayes.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
I wrote about Nell Brinkley, who I had already done an entire book on, but I wanted to concentrate on the work specifically, the full color work she had done in the 20s and 30s. Nell Brinkley, Ethel Hayes, whose style of Art Deco was so sleek and so extremely deco. And finally, Virginia Huget, who really probably the one who needed the most coverage because people really didn't know about her. And she was wonderful. I mean, her full color pages, I mean, as you've seen from what I showed you, they're not quite what we think of as comics. They're not panels and speech, story. And they're, what's the word? You know, they tell a story in pictures, consecutive pictures. Pardon?
Yeah, sequential art. Yeah.
Sequential, thank you, they are sequential art. But Virginia Huget even did comics. Her work is in panels, and it's just, I call her the flappiest of the flapper queens. She was younger than the others. The others had been born in, you know, the end of the 19th century. She was the first one to be born in the 20th century, born in 1900. So she's 26 when she starts this stuff in 1926, which is the height of the flapper period. And because, you know, she was at 26, she's writing about herself really. She's not
Hmm.
looking at younger women. She's writing about the women in their 20s. I mean, they're all angles. They're so Art Deco, so almost Cubist. You know, they're all elbows and bent knees, and
Hmm.
it's like they're perpetually Charlestoning through life. You know, because the Charleston really was such a Art Deco was like a Cubist dance almost. You know.
Hmm. Can I ask you? I feel like I learned this because when I was in school, they one of the electives that I got put into was fashion design, and I think that might have been where I kind of fell in love with that era of art. But I don't remember. Can you explain what a flapper is?
Well, it was the slang term, really. The way hippie was the slang term for young people in the 60s, young people who grew, ironically, who grew their hair long, men and women, you know, whereas the flappers cut their hair short, and also the flappers were a specific gender. There were no flapper men. They were the women. And what it was their new freedom, really. It's quite a, you know, talk about revolutions. I mean, if you look at, see what women look like in 2020, and then go back 10 years to 2010, well, there's really no change. There's no difference. They look the same. We're
Hmm.
dressed the same. Nothing has changed. Um, then go to 1925 and see how women dressed, and go to 1915, and it's like those 10 years were a century. In
Hmm.
1915, the women's skirts are down to their ankles. They're wearing corsets. They have long hair, which they put up on top of their heads and wear those gigantic wide-brimmed hat over the hair. 1925, the women have chopped their hair off. The skirts have come up to the knees. Um, and of course, in between 25 and 15, what happened? They got the vote. And you know, we know now that there's still we have not come, well, we may have come a long way, but we sure have a long way to go. You know,
Yes.
I mean, abortion rights are being threatened even as we speak,
Hmm.
seriously threatened. It's very scary. Um, and they naively, it isn't, it's very sweet and a little sad and naive, because they really thought that once they had gotten the vote, they had it all. And we know now that they didn't have it all.
Yeah.
But you know, it's reflected their joy at their new world is reflected in their work.
So it makes the book even more exciting for me to check out, like with hearing all this other stuff that I didn't know. And I cannot wait. So hopefully it comes back in stock soon so I can grab myself a copy because I'm really looking forward to it. I wanted to ask too, now that that's done and that's all put away, do you have anything else in the works that you're planning on
There
doing?
are two projects that are they're so they're so just begun that I can't talk about them.
So like I said earlier, since you came into the industry, I think the growth of our women in both creatives and readership has grown exponentially.
Oh yes.
Still not, I think, still not where it should be, kind of how you alluded to about other stuff just a few seconds ago. But how does it feel to you to see the tides shifting more now than ever, is what I was trying to say.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. There are more women drawing comics now than ever before in the history of the arts. And they're so good, and they're so
Yes.
very good. And one of the things that has happened, I mean, it's a revolution. And one of the things that has happened because of the revolution is that you don't have to, you know, it used to be if you wanted to, first of all, if you wanted to draw comics and actually make some money, so we're not talking about the underground, it had to be superheroes, because that was the only other game in town. And if you wanted to draw superheroes, you had to draw in a certain kind of style. That was the superhero style. You know,
Yeah.
some of it was like, you know, that fist, right? You know, that exaggerated fist, things like that. And this isn't a style that women draw like. You know, equal, yes, but separate but equal. Women really do not draw like men. And also there are a lot of guys who don't draw like that either, who don't, you know, it's just a, only a small amount of even men draw in that style. And that was the only style you were allowed. And now with graphic novels and more women than ever, and also so many men, every style goes. You just have to be a good artist, every
Mhm.
style goes, and it just opens the head up to see all these different styles.
Yeah. I was wondering, could you maybe name a few of the creators that you're kind of into right now?
Okay, immediately the brain cells stop working. Oh gosh, that woman who draws a saga, what's her name?
Oh, Fiona Staples.
Yeah, isn't she great?
Oh, she's amazing.
And
Saga's one of my favorite books.
yeah, it's wonderful. And the one who draws Monstress,
Oh,
what's her
Sana
name?
Takeda. Sana
Thank you
Takeda.
so much, because the names are leaving me. Oh, Emil Farris. My favorite thing is monsters.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
wonderful. I mean, these women are so good. And they all popped up within, not even within the latest 10 years, within the latest 5 years. And there's so many more.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and like I said, it's so cool because, like I've talked about too, that, not only was it maybe a boys club in terms of creatives or people in the industry, but in terms of product that was being put out, there wasn't as much geared towards young girls. I feel, I don't know, maybe that's just my perception, but
No, you're right.
I am noticing, like, with the influx of the YA stuff, we have Raina Telgemeier doing her line of
Oh my God.
plastic.
She's the best-selling artist in America, isn't
I
she?
know,
She's
and it's
so
crazy.
good.
It's crazy. Not everybody that reads comics even knows that she sells more books than anything that DC or Marvel puts out.
Yeah, yeah.
Consistent basis.
And deservedly so. Deservedly so.
Right. So I just think it is so amazing that, I don't have to, like, it's not hard for me to search when I want to give my little girl something to read. You know what I mean? It's readily available. And I think that it is, like I said, while it has grown, I still think there is some more room to grow. I think that we saw recently some of the misogyny that's still taking place in the industry. I don't know if you go on Twitter. I don't go on anymore, except to, like, share links to my stuff. But some of the stuff I was seeing on there, it got too hateful. But yeah, so like, in terms of that, it's nice to see that women are given more of a voice in comics, that they're speaking out against some of the men that have been getting away with a lot of shit in the industry, and it's nice to see these guys get pushed out.
You know what? I can't tell you how happy that makes me, because in the 70s, when I was when I was criticizing the misogyny in underground comics, I was speaking to the wind. Nobody knew, nobody understood. And I'm not alone anymore. These are women who feel exactly the way I do, or maybe I feel exactly the way they do. So for me, it's a great comfort. And as for the, whatever they're called, the trolls, I don't take them seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always going to be, you talked about room to grow. There's always room to grow. Always. Nothing is ever so perfect it can't get better. But there are always going to be the opposite. There are always going to be the haters. I mean, we see that in politics, certainly, don't we?
Yes.
Always the people who they can't stand to see someone else, the other, whether it's women, whether it's people of color, whether it's gay people, they can't stand to see them succeeding and doing well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like you said, yeah, there is always going to be that opposing side that is against change and is against growth. Speaking of that, I wanted to ask, what do you think we need to see more? I mean, like, you've seen so many different changes in not just comics, but the world too. But what do you think we need to see to see this growth continue and to thrive?
Well, to start with, we need a new president. We're not
Well,
going to
I
get
agree with you there.
anywhere.
Yeah, I
We're not
agree
going
on
to get
that.
anywhere until we get a new president. I won't go into it because I know that this is comics. We're talking about a
Hey, if you want
non-comic
to,
one
go
today.
ahead. I don't care. You can share whatever you feel you want to talk about. I'm
Well,
with you on
well,
that. So
okay. Can I just say that the only way we're going to get any changes if we vote. We all have to vote.
I agree. But let's specific in terms of comic books. What would you like to see?
I actually can't say because they
Okay.
keep coming up with books that I love. Oh, here's another one. I'll read about. Oh my God, here's another one. I must read this. Um, I really don't know. I really can't say. There was a time well into this century when, for instance, the Eisner Awards, when
Yes.
it was always guys who got the Eisners. And it was usually guys who worked for the big two, the mainstream big two. And that changed. I remember in 2013, which was the year I was elected into the Eisner Hall of Fame, which totally blew me out because I hadn't ever thought I would ever get an Eisner. I would get nominated, but then some guy would get it. And that year, not one superhero comic got the award, and so many women got the awards. And I believe I didn't follow this year's Eisners because because everything was virtual and that drives
Yeah.
me crazy. But I do believe that again, not one superhero comic got an award. And I'm not saying just do away with superheroes, of course not, because there's always going to be generations of little boys who want Batman, who want Spider-Man. But
Hmm.
now there's so much more.
Yeah. I'm sure you're familiar with Mariko Tamaki and her work, right?
Oh, Mariko, yes, God,
Yes.
yes, she's
She
wonderful.
she's amazing. She won the Eisner this year for Best Writer, which I thought
Good,
was
good,
fantastic. I mean,
good.
and now she's taking over Wonder Woman right now.
I
She's
know.
that, which I thought was kind of cool. I recently, which is funny, I just want to share this real quick. I recently read Jill Thompson's Wonder Woman,
Uh-huh.
and as I was reading it, I thought it was funny that Mariko Tamaki did the intro, and this is 3 years ago, and now she's writing the ongoing. And I think that it's cool to see because I mean. Not to say that a man can't write Wonder Woman, but enough men have written her over the years that there is so many fantastic women writers and artists that they should be on this book. That maybe they looked up to Wonder Woman when they were younger, like you said yourself. And I want to see them get a chance to do it
I
as
don't think there should ever be a rule like Wonder Woman must be written by women. I think
no.
Wonder Woman must always be written by a good writer who understands her. It's as simple as
Yeah.
that. I mean, one of my favorite Wonder Woman writers is William Messner Loebs, who just
Yes.
who just did one of the best Wonder Woman comics ever.
I agree. I don't know if you've read Greg Rucka's run of Wonder Woman, but his was fantastic as well. I think
He's a good writer.
he writes some of my favorite women in comic books, from his Renee Montoya character to Lazarus, which he's doing currently, his Old Guard stuff. He has just such a great handle on the female character. I think that
Yes.
every man has, you know what I mean? Um, and another book I wanted to tell you about, I don't know if you've read Pretty Deadly, Kelly Sue DeConnick and Emma Rios.
No, but I've heard a lot about it.
You
I
should
know I
definitely,
must read it.
yes, definitely check that out. There's 3 volumes of it. It's poetry. I don't know how else to describe it. The way that she writes, Kelly Sue DeConnick writes the book, the way Emma Rios,
I'm a big fan of Kelly Sue DeConnick. I know.
oh, me too. She's an amazing writer. But yeah, so I was wondering, before we get out of here, I was wondering if you could share maybe one of your fondest memories in your career so far, or just a favorite memory of yours.
Gosh. Well, I've always been very proud of the benefit books that I have edited. Um, the first one was for AIDS. We're talking now about the late 1980s when AIDS was such a scourge, and when the president didn't even mention AIDS. And I had gone to England and a convention in England. And in England, I saw something called Strip AIDS, and it was a collection of comics to benefit AIDS causes. And I made friends, in fact, with the editor, Don Melia, who unfortunately eventually died of AIDS, but we stayed friends until the end. And I spoke with him over the phone when he was in the hospital, his last stay at the hospital. And trouble with it was a very good, well-meaning, and it made money, but all the strips were not about AIDS. It was just a bunch of comics that people had written and drawn and that he put in the book. So I thought, we can do better than this. We can do a benefit book for AIDS in which all the comics are about AIDS. And I went home to, here to the USA. The first person I contacted was Robert Triptow, who was then the editor of Gay Comics. And I felt you can't do a book like this without being really inclusive of the gay community. And then we found out that Bill Sienkiewicz had been talking about doing a benefit book. So we phoned him and he said, sure, I'll join you. So what we had, it was perfect. We had 3 editors. Bill Sienkiewicz had the mainstream artists. Robert had the gay artists. And I got the underground cartoonists and the women. And, so it was completely inclusive, this book. And so I phoned Ron Turner of Last Gasp, the publisher. And, because we needed a publisher. And I hadn't even finished telling him that we wanted to do this book about AIDS and would he be interested in publishing it. He didn't even let me finish before he said yes. So it was, talk about the stars being aligned. And Don Melia, who had edited Strip AIDS, loved the project. And we became really, really good friends because he was so appreciative of what we had done. So this is something that I'm so proud of. And we made thousands of dollars, for AIDS causes.
That's
so
amazing.
Really, really the benefit books I have worked on for good causes, you know what? It makes you feel so good to do good things. It's as simple as that.
That's awesome. And I think that is an awesome way to end this. Thank you so much again for doing this.
And do you know where I'm going from here? I'm going to the Civic Center where we're having a memorial for RGB at 11 o'clock. My
Okay,
time.
that's well, my time too. I didn't realize that was taking place today. Thank you again, like I said, for doing this. And can you just share a couple places maybe people can find you online, and I will also throw those links down below.
Well, of course, there's the Fantagraphics website, which I don't have on the top of my head, but you can go to them and you can find my page there. That's the closest I have to a website myself.
Okay, cool. And again, everybody that's watching, make sure you go check out Flapper Queens. That book's awesome. As soon as it comes back available, you guys need to pick up a copy. Trina, thank you so much again for doing this, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.